Welcome, everyone. I'm Patricia Kranz. I'm the Executive Director of the Overseas Press Club. Um, this is one of 22 programs we're having to honor our award winners because COVID has made it impossible to have our typical in-person awards dinner. And I'm delighted today to welcome the team from Frontline who made the documentary for Sama. Of course, Waad Al-Kateab started as a citizen journalist and started filming in Syria. And I think this is one of the most moving documentaries I've ever seen in my lifetime. And also joining us is Raney Aronson-Rath, the executive producer of Frontline. So we're really thrilled to have them. And the head judge of this award, the Peter Jennings Award, is Robert Friedman of Bloomberg. So he will be handling the conversation. So Robert, I turn it over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Patty. And thank you, Waad and Raney, for joining us here today. Usually the winners of the OPC Awards get about 2 to 3 minutes to come up on stage and say a few words about their project, and those dinners that we have, everybody does that all at once, are very moving, but they're very short speeches. Today we have the opportunity to hear you at greater length to talk about your film and the process, how it got made, and we can have plenty of time to do that. I watched your film again over the weekend. I think it was the third time I watched it, and it is both a beautiful and heartbreaking piece of documentary work. And I just personally want to congratulate you. The judges on the panel were blown away by the power of your voice, the images that you put together, and the story that you told. A very personal story about your love for your daughter, the city of Aleppo, and the country of Syria. I want to begin, because I want you to do the talking, to hear a little bit about your evolution as a journalist from the time that you arrived in Aleppo as a student. I think you must have brought a camera with you, but I'm not even sure about that. What made you start filming and thinking about what your role is and what you were going to do with that. I have a particular affinity for your story, even though I haven't heard the details yet, because my connection to journalism began when I was a student, roughly the same age, at Columbia University in 1968, during the uprising there that shut down the university. 5 buildings were occupied. Police were called in and arrested and beat 1,000 students. And it was a very traumatic and dramatic moment, and I just happened to be the editor of the student newspaper at the time, the Columbia Daily Spectator. I was committed to a life of journalism at that point. It was a high point in my career, but it was also the formative moment when, as a 20-year-old, a 19-year-old, I didn't have a camera. I picked up a pen and started writing about the events that were going on around me. So I'd like to hear your story 50 some odd years later about your birth as a journalist.
Thank you so much, Robert, and thank you for this amazing recognition. I'm so honored to be talking with you specifically, and with the amazing team who we shared together last year and the year before of making for Sama. I'm so glad also to know how you started, because it's really something similar. It's just like a matter of time. I started when I was at the 4th year at my university in Aleppo. And I started filming actually with my phone first, as so many other activists. This was something like very, it automatically happened as a response to the regime denying of everything was happening in Aleppo and in Syria. And I didn't know at that time that I would find myself like 5 years later being trapped in a city who's besieged and like reporting to one of the international channels, which was Channel 4 News. But I know that, what I'm doing was something very important. And we know that maybe this is the only way for us to participate in the revolution and to be like part of that change, which is like, it's important for all of us, for our lives in Syria. And through these 5 years, I learned how to film, like from mobile phone to a small camera to bigger camera, until I got the 7D Canon in the last year in 2016.
When did you hook up with Channel 4 or other journalists to share your work?
So for the first 2 years, I was just doing some YouTube clips or uploading some stuff from what was happening to YouTube channels, Facebook pages, and that's it. And then I start to contact with some local journalists and local channels, and then like Arabs channels, and then Channel 4 News came on board at the end of 2015, where they were looking for a resource or a journalist who can film some of the stories, because at that time, Turkish border was closed, the Russian interfere was started, and no more foreign journalists will be able to join us in Aleppo. So they contacted me. We start sending them a couple of the reports that I've done before, and then some of the news stories that was happening, and then we continue together so far.
So for a few years, you were on your own though, posting to YouTube and just trying to get the word out. Were you getting any people paying attention or traffic?
Yeah. The funny thing that when Channel 4 News contacted me, they asked me about specific story I was just doing a week before they contacted me. And I was so proud of that story and so happy. And I was uploading this on YouTube. I had 200 views on that clip. And I was oh my God, 200 people saw my report. But then a week after this, I did the same story for Channel 4 News again, and it got 1 million views after 1 week.
Right.
So I felt really how important is it to be connected with people who are outside, to channels who really have the whole world is watching.
One thing that's not clear in your movie, which is not intended as a criticism by any means, but there's no sense of other journalists operating in Aleppo at the time. What you said at some point in 2015 the border was closed and they were kicked out, but were there other foreign journalists in the city before that?
Yeah, since the revolution started, and we saw how the channels and newspaper outside were really getting so much attention about the revolution, about what's happening. We met a couple of people who came to Aleppo and to other cities. One of the journalists, which I'm sure you know, Marie Colvin, who came to Homs, another city in Syria. I met in Aleppo James Foley, who was later kidnapped by ISIS and then killed by ISIS. There's other journalists who they were coming to report for CNN, for BBC. And we were meeting these people. These people were coming for a couple of days, trying to get story as much as they can and report about our stories and about what's happening there. And that was so important, because also part of the important thing that they were doing, it's kind of feedback to us, the local journalists. We were showing them this footage. They were giving us some tips how to make this better, or sometimes they were helping us to build this connection with the channels outside.
So at some point you traded in your iPhone for a camera, and then I noticed in the movie you show up with a Sony camera at one point.
Yeah.
But you taught yourself how to use that?
Yeah, it's exactly not even iPhone. iPhone was something very professional. I didn't have iPhone. I was using Nokia something. Wow. So very even low level phone. But then day by day, at the beginning, we weren't really caring about the details, what frame is it and how quality is this or something. We were just curious to capture the events and the things that was happening in our own eyes. And you can see also through the film how my footage became better and better. The ability to even make good frames or something it's not even professional, but at that time it was something very, very important for us.
And when did you start thinking about making a longer piece, a documentary about what was going on? When did that happen?
So That was exactly after we left Aleppo in
You left.
2017. Yeah, I mean, I filmed everything you've seen without a plan of making a documentary, and I wasn't really expecting that I will be like even alive to do this. But then when after the displacement happened, I met with the team of Channel 4 News in London, and then we start to talk about making like a longer piece. And then when we start like talking about like a film that like it's not just like something for TV for 1 hour or something, but it should be more like cinema, like movie. And that's when Raney and the amazing team from Frontline like came on board, and we start talking about like a real film.
And all the 500 hours of footage that you shot, was all posted online, so you didn't have to worry about its safety or its.
No, I mean, that was something we can't afford, not even like because of the internet, because of the electricity and all of this. So I was like saving all this footage in hard drives.
Oh.
And these hard drives were like being kind of not even safe, because I mean, I remember the first time the team of Channel 4 News looked at my archive, and they were like kind of shocked about like that I don't have any backup for this. It's not been even organized. And like even the hard drives itself, it's looked like war battled like hard drives.
So you took that with you when you left Aleppo?
Yeah, 12 hard drives.
You never thought about trying to get it out beforehand, or?
I mean, like you can't really, I mean, trust anyone in the world for this, even if it's your like father or something. I mean, this is something, if it's not with me, I will not be able like even like to be okay with that. But I mean, the only thing I was able to do is like to take this with me, and even taking this was a very high risk. But for me, like this is really worth my life, because if this wasn't safe, what the point of being there? What the point of everything we lived through if we weren't able to protect the story itself?
Raney, let me ask you if you will unmute your microphone. When you first met Waad, and what your thoughts were about seeing this as a long form documentary?
You know, first of all, it's just such a pleasure to be here. I have to say, just before we launch in, that listening to Waad and having Robert, you ask her questions, I could do this all day long just to listen. I love the conversation. And especially when you get into, you know, how did she create a film? How did she even know how to compose those shots? So I'll just say, as a filmmaker, you know, Waad is one of the most naturally inclined filmmakers that I've ever met, and any of us have ever met. She's self-taught, but her composition and her ability to capture scenes is extraordinary. So she has a real gift, and we could see that right away in the footage when we were watching it. But I'll tell you a story of when I first met Waad. It was actually at the Emmys. And the reason for that is because she had won an Emmy for her work with Channel 4 News, and she was not able to show her face. And because we're longtime partners with Channel 4 and Channel 4 News and ITN, right? Those are the real backers of this film in the first place. We were just all hanging out, and there was Waad. And I learned that night, and I'll tell you, I'll never look back at that moment like with any regret, you know, oh my God, this amazing, wonderful, thoughtful woman has 500 hours of footage she was able to get out of Syria. And I had seen a lot of it just in news form. And I literally said to Ben, who was one of the executive producers, like, if you guys do anything that's long form, we're in. And so it was a very instinctual moment where I met her and I resonated with her and with Ben, the person who was with her that night, one of the big, you know, thought leaders in the UK about film and news. And we just decided in that moment that there was something great here. We had no idea that it would be a feature-length, profound film. We just knew that she was telling a story that Frontline certainly hadn't told. We had done 17 films in Syria. It's my obsession, my personal obsession is Syria. So we had been going back and telling stories from multiple perspectives, but we had never told the story that came from a woman living through war with her family and her husband, who was a doctor on the front lines. We hadn't told that story, and I thought it might resonate. And, you know, I was right about that, but we would have never known, you know, until we got into the rushes of her films, what the depth of the ability for her to tell her own story was. I mean, it was a really profound experience and a big honor.
What if I might ask, what was the Emmy that you won? What was the the film that you won for?
The foreign coverage for news.
Yeah,
news
what was it actually? What was it? Was it a single piece or?
Yeah, no, it was like the whole reports from Aleppo. It's called All Inside Aleppo. And we used a couple of like this stories inside for Sama, but with longer, like, of course, but there was like the series called Inside Aleppo.
I mean, the other thing, Robert, to know is that she mentioned the amount of attention those news stories were getting. They were in the multiple millions by then. So we weren't able to see Waad's face. We could just hear her voice and her telling. And so a lot of us, you know, especially in America, were listening like, who is this woman? So it was quite a moment when she won, but she wasn't able to go on stage. So a lot of us were intrigued and curious about her story. And it was, you know, leaders like Naveen and Ben from Channel 4 News who had identified her early, you know, and gave her that kind of platform to tell her story. It was amazing.
Were any of those things that you did before the film about Sama?
No, none of this was like personal story. There was like part of personal story when we entered into Aleppo walking. But even at that time, like there was no time even to talk with Naveen and Ben about what I was doing like else out of like this couple of news piece which we done together. Because I mean, even for me personally, like that footage was more like about personal like memory, not anything more than that. But then when we start working on For Sama, and I mean, as Raney just mentioned, like none of us knew how this film will be or how long it will be or how deep it will be. We were just but
what about the focus on Sama and telling the story of your becoming a mother and living through this the siege with an infant and then a toddler? I mean, and using that as the frame and the device for the story. How did that evolve? I mean, when did you decide that that's what?
Yeah. So at the beginning, we were just knew that we like there is something, of course, in all of this footage we need to work on, and it will be like a longer story. But none of us knew like what is it about even. For me personally, I was like very emotional about everything happened. I was kind of like shocked about the whole experience. And like from the whole team, I met with Edward Watts, who was like my co-director in this, and we were kind of like just watching to see like how we can start, because I mean, I followed people for years. We have so much stories where we can like start from. So it was very confusing. But then when we watched the personal footage that I have, and at that point, like everyone else was involved, from Naveen, Ben to Raney to Siobhan, all the executive producers, and like all of them kind of like, it was very clear for them that this should be personal. I'm the only one who was like, no, I will never do it personal. And it didn't took me like very long time, but it wasn't also very easy for me to say like, yes. Because I mean, I understand that they have a point from that, but also for me, I didn't want to brief the whole story of Aleppo through my personal story. It was for me like more like, oh no, I should talk about other people. But then when we start working together, it was very clear like, no, it's important to make it personal. It's important to make it about like that relationship as a mom and as a filmmaker into that situation.
You know, I would say, Robert, one of the most extraordinary things we saw from like the edit room perspective, and you know this from long form writing yourself, is that the film really evolved, and we gave it, you know, collectively, we all decided this was the one to give time to. And sometimes that extra time in the edit gives the filmmakers, so Waad and Ed Watts, who was there as well, it gave them time to actually find what was truly unique and extraordinary in their footage, right? And we had so many iterations of the film previous to this that were also brilliant. Yeah. But when they struck upon that idea, it was like everything just lined up behind it. And so sometimes, you know, you need to give these projects that are worth it that amount of time. And it's not easy because, you know, everybody wanted this out. You know, we're all like news people too, and we're journalists, but it was really worth that labor that they took to really find their story and to find Waad's story.
So that's great to hear that, how that evolved in the discovery process. As you produce so many documentaries, Raney, you'll know that this is an unusual form. For Sama is an unusual one in that it doesn't have the trappings of a typical documentary, which would give you some of the history of Aleppo, would tell you why Assad was such a bad guy, would talk about the political situation that was going on, would talk more about the outside world response, would give you some of that context. But instead, this starts right in the middle of, like, you're in a hospital, it's getting bombed, there's a baby, and like you don't really know what's going on, and it's so in a good sense of the word claustrophobic, in the sense that you're so in tight on this story, this hospital, this child, and only sometimes do you get, or every once in a while, you sort of lift up and see the city, those beautiful long shots of the city just being destroyed by bombing, and you realize where you are. But it's just a different kind of documentary for me.
Yeah, I mean, I think for Frontline, I mean, certainly we've told stories all sorts of different ways out of Syria, right? As Waad mentioned, a lot of foreign journalists were in Syria trying to tell these stories. And boy, did we try. And I think that's important journalism too. I think that's where we took comfort, that this isn't the only story that we're telling out of Syria and out of the Middle East, right? This isn't the only type of journalism we're telling, but I've been thinking deeply about how and why her film broke through. And I think it's because it really didn't have that wall that you're used to with the foreign correspondent. It had the actual experience of the people living it, so people could relate to it more. I mean, I can't tell you how many times, and as a woman and mother myself, I heard in crowds of people just crowding around Waad, hugging her, wanting to be close to her because they could relate so much to her story, right? As either a mother or an aunt or whatever it was that they were feeling at the time. And I think there was a feeling that there was a convening around this human story that then allowed people in the West to see what was happening in Syria in a new way. And I reckon that that's journalism too, right? So that's it, that is journalism. And I've been thinking about what Peter would think of this and, you know, his tradition of journalism. He would have looked at this and just thought, my God, that is the most original story out of Syria that we can tell. As Western journalists, you know, we can help tell. So it's been kind of an amazing expansion also for Frontline and story form that I think we're looking at for the future. How can we find local journalists to tell their own stories? It used to be that we would work with somebody who is a local journalist more in the advising us stage, right? And that's something that we're evolving around too. I think many news organizations are. And here's the best example of that.
Do you like the term citizen journalism, or is that, or not?
Yeah, I like it. I like it because it gives me like kind of space to express myself and to tell my own opinion and to say something maybe in the normal journalism like people doesn't want to like say, because that's more responsibility. And I think, I mean, personally, I consider myself like an activist before I be a filmmaker. And everything I did in Forsama was kind of that activism. On the other hand, of course, I mean, I'm also like a filmmaker, but as a filmmaker, there's kind of responsibility more to take a step back. And I wasn't able to do that in Forsama. And I think what Raney like just mentioned, it's very important because it gives like people, the people who, like this is their story, you know, when we go, even like myself, to go to report from any place now, I mean, we have to tell, like to make these characters or like people part of that story, not just like film them and go alone in our like edit and do what we think about them. They should be part of this. They should be involved in that, in their story at least, you know. And that's actually the least we can do to make the story more honest and more true and more like just like purely story.
We had this discussion among the judges about.
Oh, Robert, do you mind just one little caveat I have there as she was speaking? I wanted to mention something really important about films like Waad's is that they still go through the same editorial process with a news organization like Frontline or Channel 4 News, right? And Channel 4 for that matter. So we're still vetting every single scene that you see. When we see a bomb and we can't trace it exactly to Russia, we're not saying Russia did that, right? So there are a lot of discussions in that about how do we create like, you know, the scenes that we're seeing, but also journalism around it in those moments. So it's applying journalism to this new form. It's really interesting. I mean, it's an important effort because then personal stories you can say are vetted and true too. Right. So It's a good thing
I'm
to
glad,
know.
I'm glad you interjected. We had a discussion among the judges when we were looking at this about whether something can be both activism and journalism at the same time. And it was an interesting discussion, but we decided, yes, it can be. I mean, it is an expansion of the definition and the boundaries of how we traditionally look at journalism. But I think you're right. I mean, you can't just throw away all standards and questions about truth-telling that come into play. Waad, I want to ask you about a couple of moments in the film that struck me as particularly dramatic. One was when you leave Aleppo and go to Turkey to visit your husband's family, and then come back. And you introduced the idea of, like, was that the right decision to come back or not? You've got a baby. You've got you're deciding to go back into a clear danger zone. And can you talk a little bit more about the sort of the thought process that you had about whether to stay or to flee, not just at that moment, but any time? I mean, that must have been constantly on your mind, yes?
Yeah, I mean, I've tried so hard through making the film to find an answer and like say to people like, yeah, why I decided this or how we decided this. But then it was really complicated thing to explain. And I felt at the end, like the only way, which I will be really honest with people, is to say that, like, I don't know why I did that. There's something like just giving us like that feeling that we have to do this. And this is the only thing right we have to do. And I mean, like later I can, maybe now when I'm thinking back at that moment and start to like analyze why we did this and how we did it. I mean, Hamza is a doctor and his job there is very important. His work is really making difference in that situation. Me as a journalist who like has a camera and I'm able like to give people who are there a platform and take their stories and make it out. And that's what I was doing through Channel 4 News. And also like both of us as family with Sama also. I mean, we weren't going like to a battle where there's a front line and just like a fight. People like Aleppo as a city is like full of people, full of families, and you can see that through like the whole scenes of the film. So we were just like doing what we have to do as a family and as individuals. And I think because we lived through that for 5 years, we know these people so much. Like they were even like for us in one position or not like more than what we lived with our families. So we felt like this is part of the responsibility toward this community, not to like turn our back and like don't look at them. And you know, like it's so hard and really so far to explain even and to describe. But I think, I mean, whatever it could have been happened at that time, but I mean, I will never regret that decision at all.
Thank you. There's a scene in the movie where you're filming after an attack, and there's a child who has been injured or killed, I'm not sure, and a woman who is presumably her mother starts screaming, and at one point she says, "Are you filming this?" Was she objecting to your filming it?
Yeah, so I mean, when I was filming that, I also thought, I was confused also about why she's shouting at me in this time. And I mean, obviously for me was at that time that, yeah, she's shouting for me to stop filming because she's like going through something very hard at that moment. And like automatically I turned my camera like down a little bit until I heard her again, like begging me again to keep filming and asking me like to keep filming so the whole world could see what's happening.
Oh, she wanted you to keep filming.
Yeah, and that's confusion. I think like some people like felt it, but I mean, if you are able like to go back to that scene again, that will be like very clear again when you see this. But I put it as it is exactly because for me it was very important that confusion with all of us. I mean, even myself behind the camera, there was so many times when I felt like in 1 second, this is very important to be like filmed. But after like 1 second, I was feeling like, what's the point of this? This will be just like an additional footage. The world will not do anything for this. So that struggle was all the time between like the people who are living in that situation.
But did you have other situations where where people objected to your filming because it was so private or emotional? I mean, you were in a situation where you in a hospital where people are very emotional, and
Yeah.
I can imagine that some of them would not want to be filmed. Did that happen a lot, or how did you deal with that?
Yeah, I mean, it's happening usually, and I mean, I don't know if it's a lot or not a lot, but usually, like when you are in that situation, like for me, because I was quite like well known in Aleppo, as like I was living in that hospital for a couple of years. People from the community and the neighborhood, they know us all, like even by names. So I mean, when people come in a massacre or something like this, you can see that through people's faces, like when like they if there's camera or something, they like turn their back or they don't want to like look at you or something. And you can see also like through people's eyes when they want you to come and they want just to talk or to do something. And I mean, in both ways, as I just mentioned, like there was that struggle all the time. Like same people who they might want to be filmed today, they feel tomorrow like why I'm being also filmed today. No one will do anything. The world is watching this, the world is numb about this, and they are fine with all of this.
Okay, we have at least one question has popped up on my screen, and I just want to invite anybody else who's listening to to just put a question in the Q&A box on your screen. Let me ask you a little bit about your feelings as time went on about being abandoned by the outside world. I mean, you must have thought at some point that somebody would come in and help, that this would not end the way it did. Just talk a little bit about your sense of feeling either betrayed or ignored, or where was the rest of the world when this was going on? This was such a humanitarian crime, both the destruction of the city, a city that is probably the oldest continually occupied city in the world, that dates back to thousands of years before Christ. It's been at the crossroads of the world. I first encountered Aleppo when I've never been to Syria, but when I went to the Pergamon Museum in Berlin and saw a house from a 17th century house from Aleppo that had been stolen and reconstructed in the museum. It was beautiful. It was just an incredible experience to work there. And I started reading a little bit more about Aleppo and its origins. But a city is being destroyed, a world historical city. A country is being ravaged by a ruthless dictator, and the rest of the world seemed unable to deal with it. And I just wanted, from the inside where you were, how did that all seem?
I mean, for us, everything is happening around the world is like matter, and it will affect how like our life was in Aleppo and even like maybe now. And I mean, I would say like we were kind of feeling that we were let down, or we've been like betrayed by the whole world all the time, because when the Syrian revolution started, it started for democracy, for freedom, for justice. And we heard a lot about, Western countries, and that's the values that they really like believe in. And they wanted this to the whole world and all of this like things, which it like kind of, for us, after that, it was kind of like lies or something they was just like talking about, but they are not really like believing in. And maybe the main time when we felt like kind of shocked was after the Assad regime used the chemical weapon in Ghouta in 2012 and then 13. And we felt that like this can't happen and the world will be fine with this. And we said like when President Obama was there and he said like this is red line, and also like a couple of leaders on this world, they were like kind of talking about this, that Assad is done because what he's done. And then like now you can look back again, it's like been 9 years, the whole world is still watching, and we hear about like President Trump said, I wanted to kill him, but someone told me not to do that. And that's like, for them, it's kind of like conversation and a negotiation. For us, it's people who are dying every day, people who has been killed and still being killed killed until today. But I think we still have belief and hope, maybe not in governments anymore, but in people. And that's what I really like see through releasing the film in so many countries last year. I saw people how they were like really caring about that. They wanted to do something. They were asking us, what can we do all the time? And for me, like, yeah, I might lost all the hope with governments, but I'm still believing that people will be able to do something one day.
You didn't mention the outrage of targeting hospitals to bomb, which of course was where you were living.
Yeah, I mean, if I want to talk about the Assad crimes, we will not finish today. So, I mean, I just like, I've mentioned the first thing we were shocked at, and then like so many things happened after that. And really, there's so much even crimes which people outside doesn't even recognize. And I felt this like in one very particularly like personal thing happened with me. For me, like personally, the displacement was the worst thing I've ever like witnessed. And when I was out, like so many people were telling me like, oh, congratulations, you get out from Aleppo alive. And, you know, like no one really understanding what does that mean.
Well, let me ask you about that scene towards the end of the film where you do leave and the deal that the Russians say, we'll give you free passage out if you get out. Was there, I mean, that's a very emotional moment, obviously, in the movie. Was there much discussion about whether to stay or to go? And also, after you left, was there a sense of guilt that you did leave? I mean, can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, the guilt so far is kind of exists because, of course, we wanted to stay, but at the end, like we know that this is even wasn't our decision, not personally and not like in general, everyone in Aleppo, wasn't something we agreed on. Like we had no other option, like either to leave or you will be killed, all of you. So it's kind of like we were kind of like displaced exactly. And that's why we feel in one way or another, we did everything we were able to do just to stay. And even that decision was taken from us. I mean, when we were inside, we were kind of like not really believing that this is what will happen. Because I mean, the whole world was helping Russia and Assad regime to take Aleppo and to control Aleppo again. And no one really was thinking about these people. They just wanted maybe kind of like not for a massacre to happen, but also they didn't want like to protect us where we were living. The WHO, the UN, the Security Council, all of these people were just like kind of watching and maybe like not on purpose, but they were supporting Russia in one way or another, like to like element what they were really wanted.
Can I ask you a little bit about your life since you left Aleppo? Obviously, a lot of time was spent on making this wonderful documentary. You made it to London. You're living there now. I mean, can I ask you both? I'd like to know a little bit about your professional life now, post this film, and what you're working on or want to work on, and also, of course, I want to ask you how Sama is doing.
Yeah, I mean, we started our life here in London like around 3 years ago. We lived 1.5 years before that in Turkey, and then we came here. 2 years fully for Sama, like just to make for Sama, and then like almost 1 year of releasing the film everywhere. And I mean, Raney knows about this because none of us like expected that the film will go like widely in the world like this. And now it's been like literally 1.5 years since For Sama was released. And we almost every day have at least like one event related to the film. So it's taking most of the time. On the other hand, I'm still working with Channel 4 News. I reported like a stories from hospital here in London when the lockdown happened. I went to Moria in Greece where the fire happened, and also I did the story from there. So I'm keep doing like a couple of stories and the rest of the time. And we have like a new film which we started like develop as an idea to work on for next project.
Can you talk a little bit about that?
I mean, we're still like very early in the process, but it's also like with Channel 4 News, and it's a story about Syria and about the deep experience about a girl who like facing something related to the past, and it's about memories, it's about like everything we were fighting for before, but it's about kind of like now.
A documentary or a fiction film?
It's a documentary, yeah.
Right. And Sama?
So Sama just started school last week, and or maybe not last week, maybe last month it's became, I'm still like saying last week. And she's like over the moon since she started school. I mean, she's so happy, and if she can like even go on weekends, she want to do this. So, I mean, I'm even like shocked how happy she is about that. And just, it's so nice to see like her, how she's really happy and enjoying the life here. But at the same time, I mean, it's not just about Sama, it's about all the children who maybe today live in camps or in very bad situation, or still until today in Idlib, who's been under shelling and bombing. So, I mean, I hope that something soon will happen in Syria and the whole life will be different. And I hope, of course, if I can like take her and her younger sister to go back to Syria and like continue our life there.
That is your hope for the future?
Yes, that's my main dream, actually. Yeah, I hope that's, I mean, I know this is not a realistic thing, but this will be like always my goal.
But you said in an interview, I read that your daughter's already speaking with a British accent.
Yeah, yes, I mean, it's good, but I mean, I'm trying to teach them Arabic, and it's so hard in this situation. But I mean, I will keep like insisting on the Arabic too.
Have you thought about when you will show the film to Sama and what you will say to her?
I mean, this is a very hard question, and I've been asked this so much. Raney knows this. Like in every screening, there's someone who's asking us this question. But I mean, I really don't know. But you know, like this time, with children can go to YouTube and search for something by themselves. She knows there's a film called For Sama. She's super excited about that idea, but she doesn't know really like, and she's not fully understanding like what is it about and how is it about. She knows we are from Syria, Aleppo. I tell her sometimes like bed story before like she goes to sleep, and it's mostly about the nice things that we've lived through. But I mean, I don't know when really she will be able like to watch it fully.
I have a 5-year-old granddaughter, and I know how inquisitive they can be in asking questions and beginning to grapple with big things like death and life. And it won't be long before she's going to start asking you tough questions.
Yeah. No, she's asking me. Yesterday, she was when I picked her up from school. She was telling me like, why we can't go to Syria? And I mean, it's so hard question, but like naturally, I was telling her like, because there's a monster in Syria, and when he's done, we can go. And she was like, oh, okay, nice. She was like kind of fine.
Raney, you are a veteran winner of the OPC Awards. I've seen you up on the stage many times over the years, and it's to your credit that you get involved in so many wonderful documentary projects, you and your team at Frontline. Is there anything more you want to say about this collaboration and this project before we take any further questions?
Yeah, you know, I'll share an anecdote which really showed us that this film was going to resonate in a way that we really hadn't seen a film, at least that Frontline was associated, resonate. And it's a little story, but it says it all. So Hamza, who is her husband, an amazing doctor in the film, and Waad and the whole crew from Channel 4 and Channel 4 News were at a screening at Hot Docs, and we were all outside as the people inside were screening. So we're standing outside because we've seen the movie like 2 million times. So we're outside, we're just gabbing and we're talking, and we see a man walk out just in tears. He goes into the bathroom. We're like, oh God, we hope he's okay. We hope he's not leaving. You know, that's like a sad thing when people leave the theater. And then he came back and he saw Hamza, and he literally runs across the area and gives Hamza the hugest hug. And so myself and my colleagues were like, well, maybe this is a long lost cousin. It could be a friend. But actually what had happened to him as an audience member was he was so happy that Hamza was alive, because the way that the film is told, you really don't know if Hamza's gonna live, right? And the way that it's told is you're wondering and you're praying, frankly, right? He's going to live. So that moment just said to us, you know, this is something different, that somebody would feel that level of connection to a person in our films. Maybe we were breaking through in a way that was unusual. And, you know, when I think about Peter and Peter Jennings' legacy, you know, I take that very seriously, having worked for him once upon a time, much younger in my career, and how much I think he would have seen this as, you know, a real piece of journalism in its own right. And we're just really proud to be associated with it.
Thank you. If there are any questions from people listening in, please put them in the Q&A box or the chat room, or raise your hand, or let me know if you have anything you want to ask. I think that I've covered most of the ground that I wanted to ask about. Waad, maybe before we go, you can just say a few more words about Syria and about your hopes to return, and are you in touch with people in Aleppo now at all? Are you have a sense of what the future may or may not hold? It doesn't look good from where I sit, but I don't know about what your perspective is.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't look good, or not going even any further, like better, but I still believe really that at the end of this, like the right thing will happen, and it doesn't matter how long it will last, but I'm sure at the end it will be like a free country, like a country with full of people who like me, activists who wanted to see this day one day, and we will keep doing everything we are doing just like toward that day. And also, like, I think that like Syrian people all over the world, like now, like over half of the nation now are refugees, and they were fleeing their homes internally or outside. And all these people are like planning and hoping to be back one day. But what can we do now is more like about focusing on the present, on the things that we can do, like until that day will happen. And also, I want to say something to all the journalists and filmmakers around the world. Like, there's thousands and millions of stories in Syria which need to be told. So, I mean, like, please come and talk with people. Like, do what you can towards Syria. And no matter what is your job or what is your career, like, if you are, if you want to do something, there is a possibility of doing something. So please, like, go and follow Action for Sama, the impact campaign that we created around the film. And I mean, thank you everyone who watched the film. Like, please tell everyone you know about that. And I hope really, like, the whole world will be in better position next year.
Thank you. Your comments are inspiring, as is your work. If you, as a 19-year-old young woman, can pick up a phone and start making journalism, and then in your 20s create such a beautiful movie as For Sama, I think your call to other people to tell their stories is a powerful one. So thank you for joining us. Thank you, Raney. I see that we have Casey Jennings was on the call, sending her congratulations. Thank you again, OPC, for the opportunity to judge this panel and to host this conversation. Patty, did you want to say something to conclude?
I just had one question about a shot at the very end of the film, where they pan way up, and you're walking down the road. How was that taken? I mean, you couldn't have taken it.
That's another question that always gets asked.
Yeah. So I got that drone from a friend. We were sharing this drone together, and I was like just training how to use it. And one day I was working on another project which didn't happen at the end. And in that story, I was talking about being pregnant and pregnancy with other women. And I thought that, this could be like really nice shot to finish that project. So I've asked Hamza and our friend to go with me and take this shot. So I was like planning, okay, take like this and like that. And because I was so bad at like filming at a drone, so I didn't expect that they will make really like good shots. But because both of them, they play PlayStation a lot, they did that perfectly. And I was so angry when I saw this footage. Like, I was like, wow, that's so beautiful. Why I can't do that? And yeah, it's helped so much in the film. Like, it was something as we planned, but it wasn't really planning for summer at all.
It's a beautiful way to end the film. Yeah.
And I just want to really thank you, and thanks you all for this amazing opportunity. Thanks to you, Robert, and all the jury for choosing for Sama, and for you, Raney, to be supportive through all the process. And I really hope that this story will be spreading more out and out.
Right.
Okay, thank you all.
Well, thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.